Alright guys, tonight we're going somewhere darker than usual. Forget the history book talk of glorious innovation and steam-powered progress. We're digging into the secret that fueled the Industrial Revolution, a secret hidden deep in the earth. The truth? You wouldn't have lasted a day. Congratulations, you're 5 years old and you've just been hired for your first job. You'll spend 12 hours a day sitting completely alone in the pitch-black darkness of a coal mine. Your only task is to open a door. Sounds easy, right? Except if you fall asleep you could kill every single person in the mine. This wasn't some rare, horrifying exception. This was business as usual. The Victorian era's insatiable hunger for coal needed bodies, and when adults were too expensive or the tunnels were just too small, owners turned to the cheapest, most disposable labour force they could find: children. They were paid a fraction of an adult's wage, and their tiny bodies were perfect for squeezing into the suffocating passages of the underground world. So today we're going deep into the mines to uncover what life was really like. This isn't just a story of hardship. It's a story about what happens when progress is built on the backs of children, and the long, brutal fight to pull them back into the sunlight. So, you're a kid, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Your day starts before the sun is up. Your first job title, Trapper. After a long walk and a terrifying descent into the earth in a rattling cage, you're left at your post. Your job is deceptively simple. Sit by a ventilation door and pull it open when a coal cart needs to pass. Then shut it again and wait. But this was a job with horrifying responsibility. These doors controlled the airflow. You leave one open, the ventilation fails, and methane gas, what the miners called fire damps, and builds up. A single spark from a pickaxe, and the whole tunnel becomes a fireball. Forget to close that door, or worse, fall asleep, and you've just signed a death warrant for everyone. The real horror, though, was the isolation. For up to 12 hours you'd sit in a small hole carved out of the rock, almost always in complete suffocating darkness. Candles were a luxury, and owners weren't wasting them on you. The silence was absolute, broken only by dripping water, the scuttling of rats, and the distant rumble of an approaching cart. We only know the grim details because of a government investigation in 1842. Listen to what 8-year-old Sarah Gooder told the commission. "I'm a trapper in the Gorber pit. It does not tire me, but I have to trap without a light and I'm scared. I go at 4 and sometimes 3:30 in the morning and come out at 5 and half past. Sometimes I sing when I've light, but not in the dark. I dare not sing then." Her fear was justified. Another boy testified that he fell asleep once and a coal truck ran over his leg. They told him the next time he'd be crushed. The psychological damage of being locked in a dark hole as a child is hard to even wrap your head around. Many kids said they never saw daylight for weeks during the winter. You went down before sunrise and came up after sunset. If you survived being a trapper, you graduated to something even worse, the back-breaking life of a hurrier. Your job was to haul the coal from the coalface to the main shafts. This was relentless, brutal work. You were strapped into a girl belt, basically a leather harness. A chain was hooked from the front of the belt to a wagon filled with over 600 kilograms of coal. Then, on all fours, you had to drag it through tunnels that were sometimes only 2 or 3 feet high. The ground was rocky, wet, and slick with mud that could be up to your knees. Often, you worked in a pair. The hurrier pulled from the front while another kid, the thruster, pushed the cart from behind with their hands and head. The constant pressure of the wagon would rub their hair off, leaving a permanent bald spot. An 1842 report described what they saw in visceral terms. Children were chained, belted, harnessed like dogs in a go-kart, black, saturated with wet, and more than half naked, crawling upon their hands and feet and dragging their heavy loads behind them. Clothing? In the hot, narrow tunnels it was just a hazard. It was common for boys and men to work naked. Girls and women often worked stripped to the waist. 14-year-old Mary Barrett told the commission, "I work always without stockings or shoes or trousers. I wear nothing but my chemise. I was afraid at first and did not like it." The physical toll was insane. Anne Egley, who was 18 but had started this work at age 7, testified, "The work is far too hard for me. The sweat runs off me all over sometimes. I am very tired at night. Sometimes when we get home at night we have not power to wash us and then we go to bed." If you think the back-breaking labour sounds bad, let's talk about all the other ways the mine could kill you. The very air was poison, thick with coal dust that coated your lungs, leading to a slow, agonizing death from what we now call black lung. Then there were the more immediate threats. Roof collapses were common. Flooding was a constant terror. In 1838, a thunderstorm caused a nearby stream to flood the Husker Colliery. 26 children drowned, trapped underground. And of course, there was the fire damp. The open flame candles used for light could ignite a pocket of gas in an instant, turning the tunnel into an incinerator. Injuries were just a part of the job. Crushed hands, broken legs, deep gashes. Beatings were also routine. If you were too slow, made a mistake, or fell asleep, you were punished with a pick handle. 17-year-old Patience Kershaw said, "Sometimes they beat me if I am not quick enough with their hands. They strike me upon my back." And what were you paid for this waking nightmare? Next to nothing. A child earned maybe 10 to 20% of an adult man's wage. And if you were an orphan, a pauper apprentice, you got no pay at all. Just a roof and some scraps of food. You were trapped, not just by the dark, but by a system that ran on your powerlessness. So how did this ever end? Well, those shocking testimonies from the 1842 investigation, from kids like Sarah Gooder and Patience Kershaw, were published. And for the first time, the public was forced to actually see what was happening beneath their feet. The outrage led to the Mines and Collieries Act of 1842. The new law made it illegal to employ any girls or women underground. It also set a minimum age for boys at 10 years old. Which sounds great, right? But it was far from a perfect fix. The law was almost impossible to enforce. Desperate families would lie about their kids' ages to get the income, and mine owners who hated the government interfering just looked the other way. It would take decades of more laws, strikes, and the eventual rise of compulsory education to finally kill the practice of child labour in Britain's mines. The fight was long, but it started with those kids who were brave enough to tell their stories. The story of the child miners is a pretty grim reminder of what the price of progress can look like. It's a world that's almost impossible for us to imagine. A world where a 5-year-old's workday is spent in total darkness, where kids are harnessed like animals, and where just surviving until tomorrow was never a guarantee. Their lives were short, brutal, and dark. But their legacy is why a kid's biggest worry today is what to watch on YouTube, not getting crushed to death in a coal mine. Those testimonies helped spark a revolution in labour rights and child protection that we still benefit from. They remind us how valuable and how fragile things like childhood, safety, and education really are. If you found this dive into the dark side of history valuable, go ahead and hit subscribe for more. Sharing this video also helps get these important stories out there. Let me know in the comments what piece of history you think we should dig up next. Thanks for watching.